Alrighty, folks. Let's have some coffee. If you're listening to this podcast, trust me, this podcast sounds better. It smells better. It tastes better with a cup of Joe in hand. What's going on here? What kind of agitation is this?
Aeration.
Aeration, agitate. Ooh.
Dude, classic Kenya.
Classic.
I've been drinking Kenyan coffee at Narrative too. It's like everywhere I go, I'm drinking a Kenya.
It's that season, dude. Kenya from who? Case?
I believe so. There's also a Kenya from Manhattan.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I think it was Manhattan.
Groovy. I did see that.
Yeah. It's actually surprisingly very tasty.
I told you. It's not super like this brew. I don't know.
I'm going to stop using that cone. I'm tired of the cone. I'm going to go flat based again. It's like every single time I look inside the brewer or inside the basket and there's like a gaping hole, dude. Yeah. It's like the pit of hell or something. It's so dark and scary. It's very bright. I'm surprised.
It's bright, I think, because of the brew. Like that's not what I had. Like I had it on pour over earlier today.
Yeah,
it wasn't like this, but still, like I think it tasted sweeter, more balanced than my brew. Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense because I think there's only so much you can do, and especially that debit as well. That was like pretty.
I also changed something. I didn't say. I used my own water. Oh. Hence why I think it's so bright, because my water is 123 ppm versus yours is like 50 to 70 ppm. So I have a little harder water. And then also...
kind of reminds me of like the Perfect Coffee water packets almost.
Mm-hmm. It has a much different tactile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think like this one's a bit maybe sharper. Yours seems a little soft, not dull, but just soft on the on the mouth.
Maybe that's why we're getting creamy and velvety on all of our mouth.
Every coffee, yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I think the other interesting thing is I changed the ratio, and I went back to a 1:16,
as opposed to
1:17. We always brew 1:17 here, so I put a liter of water, so 1,000 ml. Or 1,000 grams, whatever you're using, for 62.5 grams of coffee. Yeah.
It's good.
Nice. I think it's good.
Yeah. I think today when I brewed it on pour over, I was like, my extraction time was too long, 4 minutes, but I was like, whoa, this is good. This is good. So I was pleasantly surprised, and I've actually been enjoying Kenyan coffees, especially surprisingly like washed Kenyan coffees that are. I can see why some people rave about them. Some people, because they are juicy. They have that acidity. They have the punchy sweetness. Mm-hmm. It's like a very unique flavor profile.
Oh yeah.
That now drinking so many of them, I'm like, I could probably cup a cupping table and pick them out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think especially after this season, I can pick out Kenyans, not only by the smell. I think a lot of the times in the past, I would clown on Kenyans because I'm like, every Kenyan tastes like tomato soup. But it hasn't been the case. There's some vegetal Kenyans still. That's a roasting thing. But that's not a lot of the Kenyans this year have had a major, almost defective green flavor. Like a lot of the Kenyans I've had have been pretty good and roasted very well.
Yeah, this year. Same. The ones that I've had. So it could very much still be that kind of a problem out there.
Right.
But yeah, I'm just delighted. Our Kenya, I'm just like just enjoying so much. Honestly, it's like a coffee that I'm so happy that we have.
Yeah.
It's been treating us well.
And I think speaking of our Kenya in comparison to a lot of the other ones I've had, ours is definitely on the like a medium to light frame of reference when it comes to roast color. But taste wise, it's on the floral honey side. You know what I mean? Not on the other side where it's a little like, I don't want to use the cliche terms of chocolatey. Not a lot of Kenyans are chocolatey, but a lot of folks perceive the other side of the spectrum of a Kenyan coffee that, you know the cuppy I'm talking about, where it was perceived as like chocolate, dark fruit, maybe cherry, stone fruit. I think our Kenyan is on the opposite side of that spectrum. So I would say folks who are looking for a brighter one, but again, because of Kenyans having a bad rep for being underdeveloped, I don't know. Maybe I'm biased, but I don't feel or taste our coffee to be underdeveloped. It tastes very developed well, like right there,
And it could very well taste that way to you. I mean, we've tasted coffees where it kind of depends on who's cupping it. Yeah. We'll say different things, but I don't think it is. I think our coffees, the Kenya that we have is great. And a lot of the coffees that we've had from Kenya are great, not just from us.
Exactly. Because we're drinking a lot of Kenyan coffees.
Yeah. I mean, just this one, even from Woods, which honestly is blowing me away. Like, I'm like, what this? Like, and then, I mean, I've had some stuff from Manhattan, Elm,
Stamp Act.
Camber. Yeah. So really, really great. Anyways, that was a pretty long Kenya chat. This should just be a Kenyan podcast on its own. But yeah, that's fun.
Speaking of origin.
What are we talking about?
Origin.
That's right.
Yeah. We've had a lot of conversations with folks from Origin or connected to Origin.
That's right.
The last podcast with Edwin Martinez from Onyx Coffee.
If you haven't listened to that one, go back. Back. It's episode 35 with the CEO of Onyx Coffee. They're a green coffee importing company. Yeah. Also, if you're trying to source some green coffee from Guatemala, check them out for all your roasters. But anyways.
Yeah. So Edwin, then we, a while back ago, like kicked it off with Taylor because he's been our long-term partner. And we had that conversation that was very rich and personal. It was way more personal than any, I think, conversations we've had with guests. So that one was awesome. But then off of the podcast, we had a conversation with Taya, last name, I don't remember. I don't know. Very dope person, cool contact that we made through some of our other friends. And that was a conversation literally about world coffee research, all about origin, farmers, and what's going on as well in Guatemala too. So that was an awesome conversation. And I think that conversation spurred this podcast on for me because I wanted to like bring a lot of that together and be like, we're learning so much. And especially like starting Mirror and like doing all of the roasting, like, man, you just don't hear a lot about farmers or green coffee in general. And then when you become a roaster, you start learning all these things that no one tells you as a barista, or not even to say no one tells you this as a just a coffee drinker. There's so much.
There's been a lot of like the conversations that we've had have been very beneficial too, and it's been a very sobering experience and eye-opening experience.
Very eye-opening.
And it's kind of left me like, okay, this is big. Like, this is far beyond my reach, and the unfortunate thing is that it's just not talked about enough. And let me rephrase that. I know some of us are probably listening and are like, yeah, we've heard the sustainability talk, whatever. But just from the conversations that we've had recently with some people who are literally either have lived there, were born there, or actively live there and have been working there on the ground in the fields with farmers, there's so much more to this conversation. And the only information that gets leaked out is like buzzwords like sustainability, like now, ethically sourced, sea market,
FOB, farm gate.
I'm glad the FOB is now becoming kind of a term that's being that you might see on a product page on some coffee. And it's, folks, there's a lot, and I'm not going to say I have it all figured out.
No, not
to
at
be
all.
honest. I'm just as much as void of this information as probably most of you. The only thing is, since starting Mir, we've had to initiate these kinds of conversations with our importer friends, with coffee professionals, with coffee scientists, with producers, even farmers, it's these conversations that are actually leading to a change in how we see the industry and what are the things that we actually should be focusing on and showing our attention to. And a part of this is why we're stoked about having this podcast.
Yeah.
Because literally conversations like this are the catalyst to things actually changing. And like, we want this podcast hopefully to have more conversations like that are coming straight from people who are working very directly with the situation.
Yep.
It's been a handful, and the thing is, don't feel like you're doing anything wrong by buying coffee or by not knowing enough. I think actually the specialty coffee industry isn't doing a great job at it.
Yeah.
They're just not doing a great job at it, which is unfortunate. But that's just my take.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that leads me to the fact that I had a conversation with a USBC champ who mentioned this very powerful thing. It stuck in my mind. And that's like, why doesn't the specialty coffee network, but even not to point fingers, but even like the association itself, why is there not an educational campaign to the degree that Got Milk did their milk campaign? There's like celebrities. I mean, classic. I mean, I can see it in my just mind right now, like, Tony Hawk's face with the milk mustache.
Yeah.
That campaign was powerful for the dairy industry. We need something of that sorts to communicate and to reveal these nuances that most of us even struggle to understand, but don't even know the major definitions of, all these buzzwords. So the last few conversations have really opened my eyes to be like, what's important for folks at Origin and like, what is our role, like, especially with you and I talking about our ethos, and it reminds me of one of the things that Taylor said. And that was like, man, a lot of these farmers, they're just looking for a market. Like, we're not talking about like, big wig, like COE winning farmers that are like nuanced into like special processing and all of that. Like, we're talking about farmers who are literally planting coffee and looking at what should they plant to get the biggest return. Because at the end of the day, what they need is that return to feed their families. What I mean? Not to make it sound like this desperate like pity party for these folks, but no, we should treat them like businessmen and women, right? So therefore, if they're looking to make more money, they're gonna look at their costs and they're gonna make decisions based on that. And sometimes, like in Indonesia, like Taylor was saying, like Robusta makes a decent amount of money for them. So why should a farmer who's like farming a Robusta go and try to farm Arabica, which probably produces lower yield for them, and in return is more work to hold the quality? You know what I mean? Yeah. So this is a conversation about the market, and Edwin said almost like a similar story,
Yeah. What did Edwin say on the last podcast?
I mean, I think in general, his whole story was like finding a market for Guatemalan coffees. And I know that, right. His story has a lot more history, and that's like, in general, like, I remember the small bit where he said that when he went to apply for a business license to be an importing exporting company, they didn't have anything yet. So he was one of the first few people who actually had the manual, you know what I mean, for that. So stuff like that, like that he has been part of, like pioneering and creating in a sense, or finding in a sense the market. But then also he left us off with a big like future cliffhanger, and that was talking about the idea that farmers are now reaching out to like general consumers and general coffee drinkers and educating and like sharing about green, because communication like online and social like media has allowed for that communication to happen. But why are farmers doing that? It's again, they're seeking and looking for a market for these coffees, and they're expanding their market. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just a lot to cover, but and yeah, to a certain extent, I mean, I want to challenge myself, but also everybody is like, is sustainability simply about paying a higher price?
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, yeah, it'll help. Like, if, the people buying, if the market that is coming for this coffee are paying more for this coffee, that actually helps them be sustainable. Yeah. So, and that has a lot to do with just being like a business person.
Right.
Where, like, if what you're putting into the business is more than what you're selling,
you're not making money.
It's not going anywhere. Like that's it's the very basics. Like Mir sells coffee because we buy it at a cheaper price point from somebody else. We roast it, we package it, we set everything up for you to enjoy it, and then we bring it to your home. And the difference between how much we spend on all the infrastructure of running Mir and you buying the coffee, we can have a job from that. Like we can, whether it's buy a t-shirt or, whatever, pay rent or whatever it is, where for them, that's kind of the sustainability that we're talking about. Except for them, it's like, I need to pay for somebody's schooling. Like Taylor, I just still remember, like, they're just trying to get their kids in the school. That's it. But that is bringing up a bigger issue, because then you think about like, well, what happens, for example, when, first off, when that sustainability isn't there, a lot of these farmers now are just leaving the farms and going to the big city to get an education, to get a job in the city, and are leaving the farms because there's no point of working there. And guys, when people leave the farms, there's no coffee.
Yeah.
So cutting somebody short
isn't good.
It's actually you're cutting off the root, the source of it all, where that should be actually valued the most technically, for that foundation to be strong and rich, so that it can hold up the rest of the infrastructure to get that to your house.
Yeah.
And but paying more is great, and I think there's that to say for it. But then, I mean, something that Taya mentioned was like, well, what happens when a farmer has a bad year?
Yeah.
And their coffee, instead of an 85, becomes an 84, and you as a cupper have been buying their coffee for X amount of years, and you taste it and you're like, no, I'm not going to buy it. Yeah. Not this year. Well, what's the what do you do?
How do they move on? Right. Because farming is such a volatile industry. Yeah.
It's like the rest of agriculture.
Yeah, exactly.
and now we're depending on somebody. Now they don't want to. And like everyone said, like you can't make it better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's there is there. And the tough question is, now what do you do with that? Now you have to, again, it goes back to seeking for a different market.
Yeah.
If you haven't caught on, it's
complex.
It's complex. Yeah.
It's global. It's international business. It's not simple.
Yeah.
It's so many things are involved, from just like local economy to origin nations, but also our economy in the United States, political climate, all of that plays a role. And then when you take something that literally grows out of the ground and if the temperatures aren't right, if the climate is shifting, like if you were, like Edwin was talking about, if you were able to grow coffee on this side of the mountain and there's a shift in winds and climate and now you can't get that taste and it cups differently. So that affects, so you definitely bring up that valid point of like, man, like how do we make it more sustainable, not only based on price, but based on trust and commitment. But trust and commitment doesn't only come from like a roaster to a basically just the producer, but it has to include also the daily coffee drinker. So then it's also someone's responsibility to communicate and educate so that we are all understanding these like nuances like together, but we're also like committed to change like together, not just like Taya was saying, not just that the roaster and the producer are sitting on one side of the table, but everyone is sitting on the same side of the table and we're looking at coffee and we're solving this issue together. Yeah. But that requires what? Branding, very strong branding from roasters, strong marketing from roasters. And again, more education. Like we have to be like talking about these issues, not from a point of view of like, we figured it out or we know, but from a point of view, like, hey, we're learning and what role can we play right now? I think, there's so much you can unpack in that. But even today, like you and I were talking to our partners in Indonesia, not Taylor, like some other folks, an importing company we're working with. And literally the dialogue was, hey, like because of the shipping shortage, like, the fact is price is going to go up. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Price is 10 times as high for shipping as it was pre-pandemic. So that like amount of discomfort shouldn't fall just on the producer or the farmer. Like we have to carry some of that discomfort and then we have to make adjustments. And then not only that, like we're literally like calling all of the folks who are buying coffee and drinking coffee at home, like, you also have to carry part of that discomfort. And you know what I mean? That may mean that coffee is going to get more expensive in the next year or two, or even in the next 5 years. But if we want to enjoy coffee, whether that's a 82 or a 90, like we have to carry like that discomfort as well and not just leave it over at origin.
Yeah. I think the sobering thought that, Taya talked about and Edwin talked about was the fact that the farmers and producers are taking nearly all the risk of this whole supply chain. There are risks further down, yes, for sure. But they're taking on probably the biggest amount of risk. And they're also high risk, high reward, or high risk. And well, you're left with nothing. But when you're left with nothing, the implications of that are like far, like deep. And man, we're like running out of time, but I did want to touch up on just say that something that we've noticed and have heard is that just from the consumer side, buying more expensive coffee doesn't mean it's sustainable. Or as beneficial as we wish. Buying specialty coffee doesn't mean it's as sustainable and as beneficial for the farm origin level as we wish. Buying, this is challenging and I don't understand it yet. I'm still figuring out, but maybe only drinking 89, 90 plus coffees may not be the most beneficial for everybody.
Or, I mean, even more nuanced, it's not the solution.
Yes,
it may be part of the solution.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's helped many people, but that's the thing. This thing is holistic.
It's way bigger.
It's full. Think about all the coffee farmers and producers as a giant community.
And not every farmer can produce a 90 coffee, even within the same region,
Yeah.
So yeah, we can still have that privilege to pick or choose, but I think it's a sobering reality when we look at us as consumers and we basically enjoy high quality coffee and it's tasty, hands down. I'm drinking some tasty Manhattan at work.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But I think the sobering part is like, that's only one side of the story. That's only some producers. That doesn't basically reveal the whole industry, and that doesn't fix everything just by buying more expensive coffee.
And once again, it's not a bad thing as well.
Right.
So it's not, I want to end off with this. It's not an either or. It's a both and. It has to be a both and.
Yeah.
It cannot be an either or, because if you're choosing an either or, it's so limiting in the impact that you can have on such a massive thing.
Yeah.
So
I think for you and I as roasters, I think some of the things that we've been really talking about is finding a home for coffee, or finding homes for different coffees and not just certain ones.
Yeah. And it's going to take some creativity. Anyways, folks, if you want to join us on this challenging journey of trying to discover what this means, hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever you're listening, whatever your streaming platform of choice. Hit that subscribe button, maybe the bell, ding ding. Hit that thing for the notifications.
Maybe a review.
That's right.
Is it time?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess so. Drop a 5-star if you've been listening to every episode. But thank you guys so much for listening. Literally, just thank you. We love that we can share this kind of information with everybody. So thank you so much. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers, y'all.